What would you do if a neighbor kept treating your private driveway like a free parking zone? Today, I'm sharing the unbelievable saga of how Karen tested every boundary and how I fought back. It all started on an early Monday morning. I had just wrapped up a brutal night shift at the hospital, my body aching and my mind yearning for just a few moments of peace. As I turned onto my quiet suburban street, I couldn't believe my eyes. There, right in front of my house, was a sleek silver sedan parked in my driveway. At first, I chalked it up to a simple mistake. Maybe someone misread the parking signs, I thought. After all, driveways are sometimes confused for communal spaces in a hurry. I pulled onto the street and, trying to keep my cool, scribbled a polite note. "Hi there, this is a private driveway. Please don't park here. Thanks." I left it under the windshield wiper and hoped for the best as I trudged into my house, longing for a well-earned rest. The next morning, though, I stepped outside with a lingering haze of sleep and found the same car still occupying my space. The note I'd left was crumpled and carelessly shoved into the bushes, a clear sign it hadn't been taken seriously. Determined to avoid any conflict, I tried again. This time, I left a slightly sterner note. "This is your final warning. Please do not park here. This is private property." I told myself that common courtesy should prevail. Fast forward another day. I returned from running errands to find that my driveway was once again commandeered by that same silver sedan. My patience was wearing thin. I decided it was time to confront the driver in person. Standing by my front door, I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. Just as I was about to knock on the neighbor's door, it swung open. There she was, Karen. With her perfectly coiffed hair, a look of entitled defiance in her eyes, and a demeanor that screamed, "I don't answer to anyone," she stepped out. Before I could even say hello, she barked, "What are you doing near my car?" "Your car," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Actually, that's my driveway, and I've asked you nicely to stop parking here." Karen crossed her arms and scoffed, "My car is here because street parking is a nightmare. It's not like you're using this space all the time." Her tone was dismissive, as if my property rights were some minor inconvenience in her day-to-day life. I explained how my elderly father needed the space for safe access when he visited, and how my wife relied on it when coming home from work. I even mentioned the added stress of circling the block in search of a parking spot after a long day. But Karen just rolled her eyes and muttered something about overreacting. For a few days, I hoped she'd understand. I mean, couldn't we all just be neighbors? But then things escalated. One Saturday morning, I returned home to find not only Karen's car in my driveway, but also a friend's car parked behind it. That extra car blocked my wife from leaving the garage, and I realized this wasn't a one-off mistake. It was a deliberate act of disregard. I snapped a few photos and, after a brief moment of hesitation, decided to call a tow truck. Watching from my front window, I felt a strange mix of vindication and nervous anticipation as the tow truck hooked up Karen's car. Within minutes, it was gone. I took a deep breath, thinking that maybe, just maybe, this would be the end of it. But Karen was not one to back down quietly. That very afternoon, while I sat on my porch enjoying a much-needed cup of coffee, I saw her storming down the street. Her face was a furious shade of red, her arms flailing as she shouted on the phone. When she finally reached my house, she nearly tripped over her own indignation. "Where's my car?" she demanded, pointing directly at me as if I were somehow responsible for the mishap. "Your car got towed," I said calmly, trying to keep a firm but friendly tone. "It was parked on my property again." Karen's face twisted in anger. "You can't do this. This is harassment," she screamed, her voice echoing down the block. Before I knew it, she had dialed 911. Within 20 minutes, 2 police officers arrived. I greeted them, explaining the situation with all the evidence I had, photos, videos, and even a copy of the tow receipt. One officer looked over my shoulder at the driveway and said, "Ma'am, this is private property. She had no right to park here." Karen began to protest, waving her arms wildly and trying to redirect the officer's attention. But it wasn't long before one of them pointed out that she'd been warned repeatedly and that this was purely a civil matter. With a huff and a dismissive wave, she was told she'd have to settle the towing fees if she ever wanted her car back. As the officers left, I couldn't help but feel a small, hard-won victory. You'd think that would be the end of the saga, but Karen had other plans. Over the next week, whispers began to circulate among the neighbors. I'd started receiving text messages from a few friendly faces saying they had noticed Karen's antics for a while. Apparently, she'd been parking in front of other driveways too and complaining loudly about unreasonable neighbors. One day, I returned home to find a neatly typed letter taped to my front door. It was from Karen, written in her aggressive, self-assured script. She claimed that I was disrupting the sense of community by refusing to share my driveway and demanded that I be more accommodating. I couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it. Apparently, Karen thought she could rally the entire neighborhood against me. Curiosity got the better of me. That evening, I took a walk around the block, striking up casual conversations with my neighbors. To my surprise, almost everyone admitted that Karen's behavior was a constant source of irritation. One neighbor even recounted how she had once parked in someone else's driveway and then had the audacity to complain when her car got towed. It turned out that Karen's claim of being a victim was, well, a total fabrication. Determined to ensure that my driveway would remain a no-parking zone, I decided to up my game. I installed a basic, motion-activated security camera facing my driveway and replaced the old note with a new, crystal-clear sign: private driveway, no parking. Violators will be towed at owner's expense. I even gave the local tow company a heads up, and they assured me they'd be on standby should Karen ever decide to test the limits again. Sure enough, one sunny afternoon, as I was catching up on some reading, my security camera beeped with activity. I checked the feed and saw the all-too-familiar sight: Karen was pulling into my driveway. This time, I didn't even bother stepping outside. I simply called the tow truck, and before long, Karen's car was hooked up and off to the impound lot, this being the second time it had happened. The next time I saw Karen around, she avoided eye contact completely, as if the universe had finally taught her a lesson. My neighbors started referring to my driveway as the Karen zone, with a mix of laughter and sympathy. Every time a tow truck passed by, I'd share a knowing smile with the guy driving it, both of us silently celebrating the victory of personal space over entitlement. Looking back, the whole ordeal taught me an invaluable lesson about boundaries. Karen's repeated intrusions weren't just about a car parked in the wrong spot, they were about respect, or rather, the lack of it. It made me realize that standing up for what is right doesn't always require a loud fight. Sometimes, it's a matter of calmly enforcing the rules and letting the consequences speak for themselves. So, if you ever find yourself facing a neighbor who thinks your driveway is just another public parking lot, remember this story. Sometimes, the best defense is a clear sign, a good security camera, and yes, a reliable tow truck. It's not about escalating the conflict. It's about preserving your peace of mind and ensuring that everyone respects your personal space. And that's the story of how Karen kept parking in my driveway and how I ultimately reclaimed what was rightfully mine. Thanks for listening, and I hope this tale inspires you to stand up for your boundaries, no matter how persistent the intruder might be.